Well, looky here. The White House has unveiled an entire website talking about the lab leak theory that was censored for so long during the COVID-19 pandemic. Check out this site unveiled. This is at whitehouse.gov. Actually, I think you could get to this site if you go to, there's an easier way to get to it. What is it? It is covid.gov. So if you go to covid.gov right now, this is what you're going to see put out by the White House. So here's the lab leak, the true origins of COVID-19. We're going to go over what this website says. This is just really, what's amazing about this is the fact that this wasn't allowed. We weren't allowed to talk about the lab leak. We weren't allowed to say, is there a possibility that this didn't just happen naturally? Is there a possibility that this came from a lab or, rather than just, it came from a bat from a Wuhan wet market. They never found the bat. They never found the origin of it. But then they said, how dare you ever call it a lab leak? And if you do, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And we were censored. We were silenced. We were demonetized. I mean, so much happened. And now here's the White House. Here we are, fast forward 5 years. And the White House is now putting out the origin story of COVID-19. But I think the big question we have to ask during this is, what is the motivation of doing this? And we're going to get to that. But let's first look at the site a little bit more in depth. So the origin, the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials in the media to discredit the lab leak theory, was promoted by Dr. Fauci to push the preferred narrative that COVID-19 originated naturally. Now, remember, that was a publication that was put out by Fauci and a few other scientists, top leading scientists, who came out after there were rumblings from other scientists who looked at the virus and said, wait a minute, this doesn't look like it this doesn't look like it evolved naturally. So some raised the alarm, and then Fauci quickly went to work to cover it up and got some fellow buddy scientists involved in this. And that is what the paper, The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2, that was published, that was pushed to all these media outlets. And then media outlets were told, this is the official story. Anything else is quackery. So don't even pay attention to it, delegitimize it. And they followed suit. They all just parroted exactly what Dr. Fauci told them to parrot. So it goes on here. Number one, the virus possesses a biological characteristic that is not found in nature. Two, data shows that all COVID-19 cases stem from a single introduction into humans. This runs contrary to previous pandemics where there were multiple spillover events. Three, Wuhan is home to China's foremost SARS research lab, which has a history of conducting gain-of-function research, which is gene-altering and organism supercharging at inadequate biosafety levels. 4, Wuhan Institute of Virology researchers were sick with COVID-like symptoms in the fall of 2019, months before COVID-19 was discovered at a wet market. And that's also true with sampling, scientific samplings that were found in Italy, actually, back from, I think the tissue samples were from September of 2019. I believe they were cancer patients, and they had tested their blood, and they needed to extract their blood for some other tests. And they later on found that the samples of the blood that they took from September had antibodies to COVID in it. So we now know from that scientific evidence, at least we can somewhat conclude or deduce that there must have been this virus circulating well before the supposed event in December of the Wuhan wet market event in December of 2019. 5, nearly all measures of science, if there was evidence of a natural origin, it would have already surfaced, but it hasn't. Right? Where's the bat? And that's the thing that we should have always been asking from the beginning. And many of us who were saying, why not look at the lab leak theory? And then we were called conspiracy theorists. We were just saying, look, you don't have any evidence otherwise. You're just saying it without evidence. And then when we say, hey, why don't we look at a lab leak, considering Wuhan does have, a lab that's a bat lab testing coronaviruses. I mean, one would put this together if you were a logical person and maybe say, let's look at that. But instead, it was completely silenced and without evidence. I mean, all of it without evidence. So they go and show this this map here. So the wet market, the seafood market there, that is where those who claimed it never could have come from a lab, this is where they claim it came from. And then the lab, you could see, is just right there. So why wouldn't it have possibly come from a lab? It's all in Wuhan. How dare you talk about that? Okay, proximal origin publication. The proximal origin publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials. Oh, did we already? So I guess this is pretty much similar. This is just kind of, this part of the page is just sort of going over what it just kind of did in the points, but it goes into it a little bit more deeply. Like, let's look at this EcoHealth Alliance. EcoHealth, under the leadership of Dr. Peter Daszak, used U.S. taxpayer dollars to facilitate dangerous gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China, after the Select Subcommittee released evidence of EcoHealth violating the terms of its National Institutes of Health grant. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services commenced official debarment proceedings and suspended all funding to EcoHealth. New evidence also shows that the Department of Justice has opened an investigation into EcoHealth's pandemic-era activities. So yeah, first they were saying, oh, there's nothing related there. And then there was some documents that came out and they were, oh, okay, I guess we have to now sanction or essentially take the funding away from EcoHealth Alliance. EcoHealth Alliance plays a major important role in all of this because what it shows is that Wuhan lab wasn't just China-run, China, operatives. It wasn't, if it came from the lab in China, it wasn't necessarily China's doing. This was an international lab based in China because China has more relaxed laws. So a lot of scientific testing, a lot of, this is why we have like black sites outside of the United States that we can do all sorts of torture, right, offshore and get away with it, or we contract the Israelis to do it because they don't have the same rules of warfare that we do. So we tell them to do all the dirty work that we can't. This is the same for science, not just war. But in science, the scientists realize, well, we got all these rules and regulations in the United States, so we've got to offshore it. Just like manufacturing, we offshore it because we can get away with child labor overseas, right? So scientists also offshore science and scientific experimentation because they can get away with more in parts of the world where the rules are more relaxed. And that goes for China. The rules have been more relaxed. That's why the Wuhan lab was an international lab that attracted Western scientists as well as Asian scientists alike. So even if it came from Wuhan, it could have come from any of the nations could have potentially had an agenda and then released it in that Wuhan market or Wuhan lab so that it could be pinned on China potentially. Or just, even if they weren't trying to pin it on China, if it was just an accident, it could have been anybody, is the point. NIH failures. NIH procedures for funding and overseeing potentially dangerous research are deficient, unreliable, and pose a serious threat to both public health and national security. Further, NIH fostered an environment that promoted evading federal record-keeping laws, as seen through the actions of Dr. David Morenz and the FOIA lady, Marge Moore. So here's Dr. Fauci, who has a full, he's fully been, clemency. He got the executive grant of clemency right here. You can see it on the page by Joe Biden, ensuring that Fauci would evade any and all prosecution for this. I mean, just think about that. A global pandemic that ruined lives. I mean, lives were ruined and it was covered up. We have evidence of it being covered up, the actual origin. We have evidence of Fauci lying, and he's been granted clemency, never to face any sort of charges, never to face any sort of accountability for ruining the lives of billions of people all around the world. So he received the pardon. I guess it was a pardon. I don't know what the official term is on this. HHS obstruction. The Biden administration's HHS engaged in multi-year campaign of delay, confusion, and non-responsiveness in an attempt to obstruct the Select Subcommittee's investigation and hide evidence that could incriminate or embarrass senior public health officials. It appears that HHS even intentionally under-resourced its component that responds to legislative oversight requests. Yeah, all of this was completely delayed. Imagine a murder scene. Imagine a murder scene, and investigators say, we're not going to investigate this right now. Like, somebody died. It's clearly a murder. They've been stabbed to death. And they're saying natural causes. We're not going to investigate. It was natural causes. The rest of us are saying, wait a minute, obviously it's not natural causes. We need to investigate. And they say no. And they allow the crime scene to go uninvestigated for years. 5 years, the crime scene goes uninvestigated. What happens in that 5 years? Contamination of the crime scene. So by the time you do choose to investigate, you're not going to find anything because everything can be doubted because of the amount of time that has passed and the amount of contamination. Same goes for the origins of COVID-19. Since they shut down any and all discussion, debate, questioning of it being anything other than a leak from a wet market, We have now lost all and any traces of where it maybe potentially actually came from. Even if we suspect it was Wuhan and the lab, what can we do about that now, 5 years later? Nothing. The crime scene's been contaminated on purpose. That is obstruction. People should go to jail for that. EcoHealth obstruction. EcoHealth President Dr. Peter Daszak obstructed the Select Subcommittee's investigation by providing publicly available information, instructing his staff to reduce the scope and pace of productions and doctoring documents before releasing them to the public. Further, Dr. Daszak provided false statements to Congress. Now, I don't think he has a pardon. I don't think he has clemency. Dr. David Morenz, Dr. Fauci's senior advisor, Dr. David Morenz, deliberately obstructed the Select Subcommittee's investigation, likely lied to Congress on multiple occasions, unlawfully deleted federal COVID-19 records, and shared non-public information about NIH grant processes with EcoHealth President Dr. Peter Daszak. Then going on to New York obstruction. New York's executive chamber, led presently by Governor Kathy Hochul, redacted documents, offered numerous illegitimate privilege claims, and withheld thousands of documents without an apparent legal basis to obstruct the Select Subcommittee's investigation into former Governor Cuomo's pandemic-era failures. The same Governor Cuomo who's now going to be running for New York City mayor and will probably win. So they do this, Forbes put this video here of the breaking news, COVID-19 lab leaks cover-up probed. The World Health Organization, the WHO response to the COVID-19 pandemic was an abject failure because it caved to pressure from the Chinese Communist Party and placed China's political interests ahead of its international duties. Further, the WHO's newest effort to solve the problems exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic via a pandemic treaty may harm the United States. Right? That's us giving away our sovereignty by saying, in the event of a future pandemic, which could be controlled by any country in the world and by Bill Gates, suddenly we have to adhere to these certain rules. And luckily, so far, the Trump administration has said no to that. But the problem is there will be a time when Democrats take power again, like it or not. And I think AOC will probably be president of the United States, and that will come back into play. So these are the types of things that we have to ask Congress to actually make laws, put them in the book so that it can't just be overrid by executive order. Social distancing. The 6 feet apart social distancing recommendation, which shut down schools and small businesses across the country, was arbitrary and not based on science. You think. I remember when we were having to walk in one direction in the grocery store as if that was going to do anything. There was just so much ridiculousness that happened with social distancing and, you have to wear a mask while you're walking through the restaurant, but then you could sit down and take your mask off, like as if your breathing will just stay isolated around your table. Mask mandates. There was no conclusive evidence that masks effectively protected Americans from COVID-19. Public health officials flip-flopped on the efficiency of masks without providing Americans scientific data, causing a massive uptick in public distrust. Yeah, and in the beginning, what were we doing? People didn't even have masks. We ran out of masks. People were using handkerchiefs. Nothing. It was all lots of science. Follow the science, they told us. Lockdowns. Prolonged lockdowns caused immeasurable harm to not only the American economy, but also to the mental and physical health of Americans, with a particularly negative effect on younger citizens, right? I think they're all sociopaths now. They were all wearing masks. We were all wearing masks. Little kids did not get to learn to read facial expressions, so they can't read emotions. If you can't read emotions, you're going to become a sociopath. I'm really worried about our future because of that. Also goes on to say New York pandemic failures. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's March 25th order, which forced nursing homes to accept COVID-19 positive patients, was medical malpractice. Evidence shows that Mr. Cuomo and his administration worked to cover up the tragic aftermath of their policy decisions in an apparent effort to shield themselves from accountability. It was definitely a failure, but I do have one question about it. What else would you have done with these people? So I'm not saying that they needed to go to the nursing home, but you have elderly people who are needing full-time medical care. And what were you going to do with them if they couldn't go into a nursing home? Were they just going to be left home to die without medical care? I'm just curious. I'm just asking that question. Because if you are going to criticize something that clearly was a bad decision, you have to at least come up with a better decision than the bad decision. Because if the only option is just a bad decision, then what are you going to do about it? So I'm just curious what the option was for these older patients needing full-time medical care. You're not going to leave them home to rot with no assistance, are you? Just because they had COVID-19. I mean, I think that would be worse, personally. But I'm just curious. I'm not defending Cuomo. COVID-19 misinformation. Public health officials often misled the American people through conflicting messaging, knee-jerk reactions, and lack of transparency. Most egregiously, the federal government demonized alternative treatments and disfavored narratives such as the lab leak theory in a shameful effort to coerce and control the American people's health decisions. When those efforts failed, the Biden administration resorted to outright censorship, coercing and colluding with the world's largest social media companies to censor all COVID-19 related dissent. Yeah, I mean, this page right here is just reminding us of how big of a failure the COVID-19 response was through and through on every level. A total and complete failure. Total and complete failure. And just a ripping of our freedoms, our rights, free speech, silencing actual science, promoting faux science, calling it science. I mean, it's just all... What a mess. And I'm glad that the White House put this out. You know, they could have just easily ignored it. It's been 5 years. But I'm so glad that they put this out because this is a reminder of how bad it was. And I'm hoping that by doing this, they're actually going to come up with policies to ensure it doesn't happen to us again. I'm hoping that this is Trump using the bully pulpit to get Congress motivated, his Republican majority Congress motivated to actually do something, pass laws to ensure this doesn't happen to us again. That's what I want. So that is that's what this is the page. This is what we need. This is exactly what we need. We need Congress to do something. We need Trump using the bully pulpit. We need attention paid on this. I'm glad, really happy to see this. He could have put this out on a lot of other different topics. He chose to do it on the lab leak. I think this is fantastic. Let's now make progress. Let's ensure laws are made. Let's ensure our rights are never ripped away again from something, and having Democrats, or even next time, even if it's Democrats pushing something and then Republicans come and do the same thing, because there's a lot of that tribalism. So next time it could be Republicans that are wrong and Democrats that are right. Either way, we need laws in the books that protect all of us from any sort of political posturing, turning something like this into something completely political. We need that. Now, on the downside of this that we have to kind of pay attention to is it looks a little bit, luckily there's not a lot of China on this page. This is a lot of failure of the American government, failure of the different factions, you know, from Fauci to Biden to the media. There's a lot of failure here. And I like seeing that versus just, it's China's fault, it's China's fault, it's China's fault. So I'm glad to not see that. What I'm curious is how the rest of the pundits, the Republican pundits that are making their rounds on Fox News, are they going to be saying, oh, it was a lab leak and it came from China, you know, the war hawks, and they're going to be saying, China, we got to go after China. We have to wage war with China. It's all China's fault. So we have to be watchful of that, mindful of that, and ensure that they don't use this for that agenda. The only agenda that we need out of this is for Congress to make laws protecting the American people, not for this to be an excuse to wage war, which would be against the America First agenda again. We need this to be America First. Let's protect Americans from the tyranny that was the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you can check out Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. The show airs live. It is a 1-hour live show Monday through Friday. Just head to KimIversonShow.com. See you there.